I used to call myself a Luddite, not ironically, not as a bit, not as something that you say to sound interesting at parties. I actually meant it. I was the person who insisted on physical books always, who thought a Kindle was some sort of spiritual compromise, who, whenever a new software would get rolled out at school or work, would quietly sit at the computer with low-grade panic rising up inside my chest, smiling while everyone else just seemed to know. And I held on to that identity, the girl who doesn't do tech, for a long time. So when I tell you that this week an astrological transit is happening that over the next 7 years will change everything about how we communicate, relate to, and use technology, and that my own story is part of the reason why I'm paying attention, I want to start by telling you about a birthday present that I didn't ask for. There's something I have always loved about objects that you can hold. Books specifically, the weight of them, the smell that's different in every copy of the same edition, the way a dog-eared page is a record of where you were, what you were thinking, and who you were when you put that book down. I annotated everything. My books looked like they had been through something. Well, because they had. I was not precious about the books themselves. I was precious about what they represented. The proof that something had happened between me and an idea. A physical receipt. I thought this was just about aesthetic, but now I think it was more about identity. Because the truth is, I wasn't just someone who loved physical things. I was someone who had decided she wasn't good with technology, and that story had a lot of evidence behind it. In school, when a software changed, when we moved from one system to another, when a new platform got introduced, when everyone seemed to have instinctively understood the upgrade, I was always lost, not asking for help because it felt like I was admitting something. Sitting in labs, in classrooms, at a desk, with this background hum of everybody knows something that I don't, that I got really good at just performing my way through. The most recent version of this was Salesforce. I got a job as an account manager. Salesforce was the platform, and I sat with it, tried to learn it, tried to navigate it, and it felt like friction the whole time. Like pushing against something that kept pushing back. I never really got to full capability with it. And for a long time, I filed that as more evidence that I'm not good with technology. But here's what I actually learned from Salesforce, and it wasn't anything about the software. I learned how out of alignment that job was for me. Because the friction wasn't in the tool. The friction was in the fact that I was using technology to try to do something that I didn't want to be doing in the first place. There was no version of Salesforce that was going to feel like an extension of me, because the thing that it was extending wasn't me. The contrast came later, when I started building the art of becoming, when I got clear on what I wanted to create and why. I started finding uses for technology everywhere. I have more Claude use cases right now than I can count. Not because Claude is simpler than Salesforce, but because I know what I'm building. And when you know what you're building, a tool stops being a task and starts becoming a language. That's when I understood the tech resistance wasn't even about tech. I'm just not a tech person. I'm more of a tactile, analog kind of person. I'm a Luddite. And here's what nobody tells you about a self-definition like that. It feels like integrity. It feels like knowing yourself. It can look from the outside and from the inside a lot like identity, but sometimes what looks like identity is actually a misread. Sometimes it's not that you can't do the thing, it's that you haven't yet found the thing worth doing it for. I had been very clear about the Kindle, very clear. It was one of those positions that I had stated enough times that it had become part of the social contract of knowing me. I would not be getting a Kindle. I liked physical books, real books. This was non-negotiable. And then my boyfriend at the time got me one for my birthday. I remembered opening it and feeling, and I want to be specific here because vague feelings are easy to dismiss. I felt something like grief. Like a small version of me had been betrayed, but not by him, by circumstance, by the fact that I was going to have to figure out what to do with this now. I thanked him. I meant it. I put it on the shelf. I think it sat there for something like 3 weeks, and then I don't even remember why, honestly. I charged it, downloaded something, started reading. And it was fine. And then it was good. And then I was reading more, not less. Because suddenly I had 40 books in my bag instead of one heavy one. And I didn't have to choose based on what I was in the mood to carry. And I started noticing that the reading itself, the actual act of sitting with an idea, underlining it, sitting with the weight of a story, that hadn't changed. The container changed. The experience didn't. But here's what actually shifted, and it took me a while to find the words for it. The Kindle became mine. I started building a library on it. I started treating it the way I treated my physical books, as a record of where I'd been. My annotations were still there. My reading habits were still there. My taste was still there. The tool had extended me. It didn't replace me. I just hadn't been willing to let it in long enough to figure that out. The Kindle was the first time I noticed that pattern. Then I started seeing it everywhere. The move from a physical planner to a digital one. Another thing I'd resisted. Another thing I was sure would flatten something essential about how I thought. I liked the ritual of writing things by hand. The physical act of crossing something off of a list. It felt real in the way that a checkbox on a screen didn't. And then at some point I switched. Not because I was convinced, but because it became necessary. And what I found was that the ritual I thought was tied to paper, the sense of order, the thinking through writing, I brought it with me because it was never really about the paper. Every time I've done this, resisted, then entered, then found myself there, I've discovered the same thing. The version of me that mattered traveled with me. The tools just gave her a new room to be in. What I was protecting when I called myself a Luddite wasn't a value. It was a self-concept that I was afraid to outgrow. And here's where this gets interesting, because what's happening right now in culture, in technology, and the way we're being asked to relate to AI is not personal. It's planetary, literally. On April 25th, Uranus enters Gemini. And I want to tell you why this matters because I'm not someone who uses astrology as a decorative layer. I use it as a lens for pattern recognition. Uranus spends about 7 years in each sign. It's the planet of sudden awakening, disruption, and this is the part I think people underestimate. Liberation, not the comfortable kind, the kind that arrives uninvited and rearranges the whole room. In Gemini, the sign of communication, information, language, the mind, duality, Uranus is at its most electric. This is where the disruption lives in the ways we think and how we communicate what we think. The last time Uranus was in Gemini was from 1941 to 1949. That era gave us the first programmable computers, radar, jet technology, nuclear energy, the early architecture of what would eventually become the internet. The world didn't just change. The infrastructure of how humans create and communicate changed. The speed of information changed. What it meant to be in contact with somebody on the other side of the planet change. We are at that hinge again. And the disruption that is arriving at this Uranus in Gemini cycle, the thing that is rewriting the infrastructure, is AI. I'm not going to tell you what I think about that. I have a whole perspective that I'm building out, and I'll get into it over the coming months. But what I will say is this. The resistance I see in a lot of people around AI, the dug in positions, the I'm just not a tech person, the I'll never use that, I recognize it. I recognize it because I felt it about a Kindle. And I'm not saying that the resistance is wrong. I'm saying that it's worth asking, what is this protecting? I'm still, in some ways, a Luddite. I'm still a person who wants to understand what something is before I let it anywhere near anything that's important to me. I still have a stack of physical books on my nightstand. I still believe that not every new thing deserves your yes. But I've stopped letting I'm not a tech person be a full sentence, because I've learned that what usually lives underneath it is something more honest. Sometimes it's fear. I'm afraid to feel incompetent again. I'm afraid this tool will change me in ways I can't control. But sometimes, and this is the part that took me longer to see, it's misalignment. It's not that the tech is too hard. It's that what you're being asked to do with it isn't yours. Salesforce was hard because the job wasn't mine. The Kindle was easy once I let it in because reading has always been mine. The difference wasn't my capacity, it was my clarity. And that's worth sitting with, because when technology feels like friction, when a tool keeps sliding off of you, when you can't make yourself learn it, when everyone else seems fine and you feel behind, before you decide that it's a character flaw, ask yourself, is this actually hard, or is this just not where I'm supposed to be? Technology, when it's the right tool at the right time, it doesn't rewrite you, it reveals you. It gives the version of you that was already there a new language, a new surface to work on, a new room to fill. The Kindle didn't make me a different reader. It made me a reader with more capacity. So wherever you are with this, wherever you are on the spectrum of I'm curious to absolutely not, I just want to offer you this one question to sit with. What is the thing that you've already decided about yourself, and how long has it actually been true? Because Uranus doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply opens the door. If this landed for you, I'm going to be going deeper on the AI pillar in the next few months. What it actually looks like to use these tools as a creative person, what I've been learning, what the limits are, and what surprised me. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if you want the essay version, the version that goes a little deeper into the astrology and the personal evolution, I wrote about that this week on my Substack, and you'll find the information in the description box. That's the art of becoming, and I'll see you in the next one.